بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله. السلام عليكم. Can you hear me? الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to the Fiqh class. Today, inshallah, we will continue the discussion of the book of Mawaqit, the prayer timings. And we've stopped at the Subh prayer. After we discussed the Isha prayer and we said the end of its time is midnight or 1/3 of the night according to another opinion, now we're moving to the Subh prayer. The reason why they mention Subh prayer, the last thing, is because it was the last prayer when Jibreel alayhi salam came after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned from Al-Mi'raj. Scholars agreed on the beginning of Subh prayer and the end of its timing. So Subh prayer, there is no difference of opinions in regards to the beginning and the end. Although some scholars mention the difference, but it is not considered. What's the beginning of the Subh prayer? What's the time? When it begins, the time of Subh prayer. We know, we say something which is dawn. But what is dawn? How do you know that it is dawn?
There's two types of dawns.
Mm-hmm.
The first dawn is not the real dawn, and the second dawn is the real dawn.
What's the false and the real?
Okay, well, there's a different, for the first dawn, the light, it goes up and down, and for the other one, it goes,
Yes, we have Fajr Sadiq and Fajr Kadib. Now, after the Sahar, after the total darkness, there comes light. There is a light comes. But that light is vertical. And it comes for a while and then it disappears also. That's what we call the lying dawn or the false dawn, Al-Fajr al-Kadib. Then comes the wide dawn, the real dawn. And that's the time of the Subh prayer. That's the beginning of the time of Subh prayer. And all scholars agreed on that. What's the end time for Subh prayer?
First light.
First light.
When the sun is up.
When the sun, I don't know, I'm asking you, what's the end?
this disk of the sun comes up.
When the disk of the sun comes up or when the light? Because the light comes before we can see the sun.
Until it's,
As far as I know, it's when the light is up.
So when you are able to see people, even if you cannot see anything from the sun,
because the thread, like when you can distinguish the thread.
that's the beginning of the time. That's for fasting.
Distinguishing the color.
You don't know? I said it is an agreement amongst the scholars.
When the first light is out, that's what I remember.
When the first light, do you know when the first light comes up?
1 hour after, about 1 hour after the...
Yeah, about 20 minutes or 15 minutes before the sun is up.
Yes.
And that's wrong.
Okay.
That's not the end of the time. What is the end of the time?
When?
In which if you prayed, your prayer is not on time. You missed the prayer.
When the disk comes up from the horizon.
When the disk comes up. When it comes up
From the
or
horizon.
when it is up. What do you mean by that? When the first piece you can see the sun or when it is up?
When it's like the beginning of when it touches the horizon.
The moment that you can see the disk, part of it, that's the end of the time. طلوع الشمس. That's the end of the time. And there is an agreement amongst scholars on that. What about the light then? What do we call that time?
That's permissible time, but it's preferred to pray before then.
It is permissible?
Yes. If
This is what we call isfar. Isfar. Isfar means unveiling. Safira, we call the woman is safira when she is uncovering. So, when you are able to distinguish things without light, that's what we call isfar. Again, scholars differed on the best time. They did not differ on the beginning of the time and the end of the time. They agreed that the beginning of the time is the dawn and the end of the time is the sunrise. But they differed what's the best time. We have two opinions. The first opinion says the best time for subh prayer to be performed is when it is still dark, or what we call ghalas. Ghalas. Ghalas means it is still dark, like 15, 25 minutes after the dawn. And that's the opinion of the majority of scholars, that you pray subh when it is still dark. The second opinion is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifah rahimahullah and others. They say the best time for subh prayer is isfar, when you can see the light, which means 20 minutes before the end of the time, before the sunrise. So in our time nowadays, if we say the dawn starts at 5:50 and the sunrise is at 7 o'clock, according to the majority of scholars, the best time is at 6 o'clock, 6:05, 6:10. That's the best time. According to the Hanafi school of thought, the best time is at 6:40, 6:45. So there is a difference of half an hour at least between the two opinions. Why they differed and what's the correct opinion? That's what we need to read. So open the book. On page 106. Issue 5, second paragraph. The reason for their disagreement.
The reason for their disagreement stems from their dispute over the method of reconciling the apparent meanings of the traditions on this issue. It is reported from Prophet ﷺ through Rafi ibn Khadij that he said, "Perform the morning prayer at the time of the daybreak. The more frequently you do, so the greater reward there is for it."
What's the meaning of daybreak? That's the isfar. أسفروا بالفجر فإنه أعظم للأجر. What does this hadith mean? It is an evidence for which opinion? For Abu Hanifa. Okay.
Yet the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, when asked about the best acts, prayer at its first appointed timing.
What's the best act? أي العمل أفضل? The Prophet ﷺ said, الصلاة لأول وقتها. Prayer at the beginning of the time. Now, if you delay the prayer and you pray during the daybreak, isfar, is that at the beginning of the time or later? Later. So what do we have here? We have a conflict of ahadith. How do you reconcile? Let's see. Read. Moreover,
it is established about Prophet ﷺ that after he offered the morning prayer, women used to depart wrapped in their woolen garments and could not be recognized due to the darkness.
This is another hadith reported by Aisha رضي الله عنها. كان نساء من الأنصار كن يشهدن صلاة الصبح مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم ينصرفن متلفعات بمروطهن. Women from the Ansar used to pray with the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, and they were wrapping themselves and they were unknown. due to darkness. ما يعرفن أحد من الغلس. Due to darkness, they were unknown. So what does this hadith mean? When do you pray? When it is dark. Okay.
The apparent meaning of this tradition is that this was his usual practice. Those who maintain that the tradition of Rafi is particular, khas, while the saying of Prophet ﷺ in its first appointed timing is general, held that former restricted the latter according to the well-known rule that the particular restricts the general.
Okay. This is an evidence for who? What does it say here? It says that the Prophet ﷺ said, you pray at the beginning of the time. That's general. But in Subh in particular, he mentioned it specifically, and he said, you pray during the daybreak. And the particular takes precedence over the general. So it is still an opinion for Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. He says, yes, the Prophet ﷺ said that you pray at the beginning of the time, but that's general. And there is no contradiction between general and specific, particular, because the particular dominates the general or takes precedence.
In this way, they exempted the morning prayer from the general implication and rendered the tradition of Aisha as a report of an occasional and not the usual practice, implying permissibility.
What about the issue of Aisha radiallahu anha when she said that woman? They said this happened few times. It's not the regular practice, which means it is permissible. But the best is to pray during the daybreak.
Thus, they maintained the praying into the light is preferable to prayer in the darkness. Those who preferred the general tradition because it is explicit and evident and also agrees with Aisha's tradition, while Rafi's tradition is subject to interpretation as it can be interpreted as emphasizing the coming of Fajr, and as such there is no conflict between it and the tradition of Aisha, nor with the reported generality in this issue, said that the preferred timing is the early portion of the time.
Okay, now again, this is an example. You have this issue, and there are two ahadith that contradict each other. Which one do you prefer? Which opinion do you think is stronger? And based on what? Now we can reconcile and we say the hadith of the prayer at the beginning of the time does not contradict the hadith when you pray at the daybreak. You pray when it is dark, but once you finish, it will soon be the daybreak. So there is no contradiction. Or, in general, you pray during the dark, and sometimes you can pray during the daybreak. So it is the opposite of what Abu Hanif rahimahullah says. We have more evidences prove that it is preferred to pray during the dark. تغليس. والصبح كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصليها بغلس. الصلاة لأول وقتها. كان نساء من الأنصار يشهدن الصلاة مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم متلفعات بمروطهن ثم ينصرفن ما يعرفن أحد من الغلس. Many ahadith prove that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray when it is ghalas. Okay, so this is the issue of subh prayer. And as I said, according to both opinions, you are praying on time, but they differed which is better. So the best thing is to pray in general during when it is dark, and sometimes pray when it is a little bit late. Now we move to another issue. Timings in case of necessity and excuse.
To the subh prayer or to all the prayers?
All prayers. Now, do we have this distinction? Do we have a time of necessity and a time of excuse, or it is only one time?
Excuse to prove necessity is what comes up. Like Salat al-Taqdeem wa Ta'khir.
Yeah.
That's excuse.
Yeah, that's different issue. The traveler prayer. We're not talking about this. We're talking about the regular prayer, to pray in a time for an excuse. The majority of scholars, they confirm that there are times of excuse. Like what? In the Asr prayer, what's the time of excuse? What's the time of excuse?
After the sun had yellow, the yellow.
After the shadow is more than twice the length. Because we said that's the end of Asr prayer. Then what's about the time? After that until the sunset. That's time of excuse. What about after midnight until dawn? Again, that's a time of excuse. But that's not the opinion of the Zahiriyya. Only the Zahiriyya, they disagreed on that. And the issue was discussed in Salatul Asr. They say the Prophet ﷺ said, the prayer does not end until the second prayer's time comes. So there is no such thing, timing for necessity or excuse. But we prove them. We say there are times of necessity and excuse. Like Asr prayer, Isha prayer, it is there. Now, we have Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah and Imam Malik. They both agreed that there is a special timing which is applicable for 4 prayers. Dhuhr and Asr, Maghrib and Isha. But they differed on what is that common time. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah disagreed. Why he disagreed? Because according to the Hanafi school of thought, when you pray while traveling, you don't combine prayers. What you do is you delay the Dhuhr prayer and you pray Asr at the beginning of its time. So it is virtual combining. It is not true combining. The same thing with Maghrib and Isha. You delay Maghrib at the end of its time and you pray Isha at the beginning of its time. That's why they don't believe in Jam'. While Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, they believe in Jam'. And they said there is a common time between those prayers. Dhuhr, Asr, and Maghrib, Isha. But what is that common time? That's what they differed on. I want you to open the book on page 108 because this issue is very important and it is a little bit complicated. If you did not understand it, now you need to read it again. Yeah, go ahead, read. Issue 2.
Issue 2. Malik and Al-Shafi disagreed over the last common timing for 2 prayers. Malik said it continues from declining of the sun for Zuhr and Asr to extent of 4 rakahs for a resident and 2 rakahs for the traveler, till a time sufficient for 4 rakahs for the resident and 2 rakahs for the traveler.
Okay, hold on. What does that mean? What does that mean? Malik and the Shafi'i, rahimahumullah, they differed on the common timing. I want you to understand this. If you are a traveler, you are allowed to pray Dhuhr and Asr together at any time of any one of them, according to them, to the majority of scholars. So if the Dhuhr time starts at 12:30, you can pray at 12:35 Dhuhr and Asr together. Or you could pray at 3 p.m. when the Asr ends at 4 p.m. You could do that at any time. This means there is a combined time to the both prayers. What is that combined time? Which means, what is that time? Whenever you reach it, you have to pray the 2 prayers. Malik rahimahullah, what did he say? He said that from the beginning when the sun declines to an extent of 4 rak'ah for the resident and 2 rak'ah for the traveler. That's the beginning. Until when? Until there is a time to perform 4 rak'ah before sunset or 2 rak'ah for the traveler before sunset. That's the opinion of Imam Malik. Read it again. Imam Malik said, the second line, Malik said
that it continues from the declining of the sun for Zuhr and Asr to an extent of 4 rakats for resident and 2 rakats for the traveler till a time sufficient for 4 rakats for a resident and 2 rakats for the traveler is left of the daytime.
Go on.
Thus he determined the time specific to Zuhr as the time for 4 rakats in the case of resident and 2 rakats for the traveler after the declining of the sun. He determined the time specific to Asr as the time for 4 rakats for the resident and 2 rakats for the traveler prior to sunset. It follows that a person who catches only a specific portion of the time of prayer is obliged for the prayer that is specific to this time, if prayer was not binding upon him prior to this time. A person who has more time than this is to perform both prayers together.
Okay, what does that mean? I'll give you an example. Because again, as I told you, you need to read it again in order to understand it. What do we mean by combined time? If you are a traveler, and Dhuhr time is at 12:30, that's the beginning of the time. You had 10 minutes, and then you slept, or something happened. Those 10 minutes, they were enough to perform 4 rak'ah, which is the Dhuhr prayer, and more. That means both prayers are obligatory on you, Dhuhr and Asr. Until when? If we say sunset, Maghrib is at 5 p.m., so if you have 10 minutes before 5 p.m., which is enough to perform more than 4 rak'ah, then Asr and Dhuhr, you are responsible for them. A clearer example is the menstruating woman. Let's say a woman had her cycle, and she became pure 10 minutes before sunset. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Are they enough to pray more than 4 rak'ah? Yes or no?
10 minutes, yes.
Yes. So what does she pray? She prays Dhuhr and Asr, according to Imam Malik, rahimahullah. She prays Dhuhr and Asr. Why? Because this time is combined, Dhuhr and Asr. She was able to perform more than 4 rak'ah. If she became pure in a time enough only to perform 4 rak'ah for 5 minutes, what does she pray? Asr only. Remember, the Dhuhr time ended already at 2:30 p.m. Now it is 4:50 p.m. It doesn't matter. She has to perform the 2 prayers as long as she has more than 4 rak'ah. Why? They say based on the traveler. Just like if you are a traveler, you can pray Dhuhr and Asr in advance or later. So the same thing for those people. That's the opinion of Imam Malik rahimahullah. Let's move and see the next. Ash-Shafi'i, next paragraph, the same page, down. Ash-Shafi'i fixed
a single limit for these common timings, which is a stretch of time sufficient for 1 rakat prior to sunset, and this for Zuhr and Asr together. The time sufficient for the rakah prior to the breaking of the dawn in the case of Maghrib and Isha together. It is also related from him that he said it is moment sufficient for pronouncing takbir. That is, a person who is able to pronounce takbir prior to sunset is under the obligation to pray Zuhr and Asr for that day.
Okay. See the opinion of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah? It is not 4 rak'ah, it is only what? 1 rak'ah. As long as you are able to catch 1 rak'ah, then you have to pray what? Both prayers. Both prayers. And this case could happen a lot. Imagine a woman who was pure, and the dhuhr time started, and then 10 minutes later she had her menses. These 10 minutes were enough to pray more than dhuhr, so she is liable for dhuhr and asr, according to Malik rahimahullah. According to Ash-Shafi'i, if the time was enough to perform one rak'ah, then she has to pray both prayers. And in another opinion for Imam Shafi'i, only one takbirah. Only one takbirah. As long as you are able to do part of the prayer, then you have to do both prayers. Why is this? Let's read.
Abu Hanifa agreed with Malik in that the last timing for Asr for those under duress is equivalent to the time of one rakat prior to sunset, but he did not agree about the common timings nor about timings specific to prayers.
Why Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah disagreed? Because he doesn't combine the prayers. He just delays the dhuhr and prays the asr in advance at the beginning of the time. The same thing with Maghrib and Isha.
The reason for their disagreement, that is Malik's and Al-Shafi's, is whether the assertion about the common timing for two prayers together implies that there are two types of timings, a timing specific for them and a timing common to them, or whether it implies that there is a single common timing alone. Al-Shafi's argument is that the combining two prayers indicates only a common timing and not a timing specific to each.
Okay. Imam Malik rahimahullah says there is a combined timing and a specific timing for both of them. Imam Shafi'i says no, it is only combined timing.
Malik, on the other hand, constructed an analogy basing the common timings in the case of necessity upon the common extended timings. This means that as the extended timing for Zuhr and Asr has a common timing and an extended timing, it is necessary that the situation be the same in cases of necessity. Al-Shafi does not agree with him about a common extended timing for Zuhr and Asr. Their disagreement in this issue is based, Allah knows best, on their disagreement over the prior issues. So ponder.
Okay. As I said, this issue is difficult. You need to read it again to understand the common timing between the prayers. I believe that if a woman became pure after like 4 p.m. and the Asr time started at 3 p.m., she prays only Asr. But they made the analogy that it is Dhuhr and Asr together, Maghrib and Isha together. They have a common time, just like the traveler, and at the same time, they have a shared specific time, which is, according to Malik rahimahullah, it starts after 4 rak'ah until there are 4 rak'ah or more, and according to Ash-Shafi'i, until 1 rak'ah or 1 takbirah. So this is the issue of the common timings. The next issue we have is the people of necessity. And they already agreed that there are 4 types of people. The menstruating woman, entering the period of purity, or beginning menstruating before she has prayed, because that's the time of she is excused. The traveler, a traveler who remembers the prayer that he missed during traveling while he is resident, or he is traveling and remembered a prayer he missed while he was a resident. He is also a person of necessity. Number 3, a minor who attains puberty, a boy who was 13 years old, he woke up and he saw a wet dream. He did not notice any signs, any indications of his puberty. So what do you tell him? This man, this boy, he accepted Islam. He became adult, Islamically. 10 minutes before sunset. Do you tell him he has to pray Dhuhr and Asr, or he prays Asr only? According to both opinions, he has to pray Dhuhr and Asr. But if he noticed this few minutes only before the end of the time, according to Malik rahimahullah, he has to pray only the last prayer. A disbeliever who accepts Islam, the same thing. Someone who is a disbeliever and he accepted Islam, what do you tell him? He accepted Islam 15 minutes before Maghrib. You tell him you have to pray Asr, or he has to pray Dhuhr and Asr? Asr. According to both opinions, he has to pray Dhuhr and Asr. According to both opinions.
The prayers of this time.
Yeah.
That he must.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it starts on Dhuhr. Subh is not a part of that.
Yeah. Or he accepted Islam at 12:30 p.m. He prays Maghrib and Isha.
PM is noon.
A.M. No, p.m.
12:30 p.m.
11:30 p.m.
11:30 p.m.
Yeah,
Okay.
the night. Okay, so they agreed that those are the people of necessity. They disagreed about one person. The person who's unconscious. The person who passes out. Someone passed out at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. And he woke up 11 p.m. How many prayers he missed?
4, 3.
Dhuhr.
What time did he go to sleep? 11? 8?
He passed out at 10 a.m.
Okay.
And he woke up, he became conscious at 11 p.m.
All 4.
Subh, Dhuhr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib and Isha. What should he pray?
All 4.
He should pray 4. Why?
He woke up today in the same day.
He was not sleeping. He passed out.
That's fine.
That's fine. Why it's fine?
He woke up before midnight.
He was unconscious.
He's just like the person who just entered Islam. What's the difference?
The person who enters Islam, they all agreed he doesn't pray for prayers.
We just said he did.
No, he prays Maghrib and Isha. But this person, he passed out on 10 a.m. At 10 a.m. So he did not pray Dhuhr, he did not pray Asr, he did not pray Maghrib, and he did not pray Isha. What do you tell him to do?
What time does he get up?
What?
When does he get up?
He got up at 11 a.m.
AM?
p.m.
And he
So it is like 11 hours or 12 hours.
prays Isha.
Hmm?
Isha.
He prays Isha only?
Yeah.
What about other prayers?
Because the pen is lifted for the unconscious person.
Unconscious or insane? Unconscious or insane?
Unconscious.
Insane.
Hmm?
Insane.
Insane.
And then he prays.
What about the sleeping person? Is he conscious or unconscious? If you slept for 12 hours, do you pray the prayers that you missed? You make them up or no? Hello?
Well, if you sleep, you make up the prayers, yes.
So, is this different or the same?
Do you make it up?
It is the same. No? It is not the same. There is difference of opinions. Some scholars said you don't make up anything. You don't make up anything. If a woman is menstruating and she became pure, does she make up the prayers?
No.
No. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says the one who passes out, he makes up the prayers as long as it is less than 5 prayers. If he passed out for more than 24 hours, he doesn't pray.
That makes sense. That means Ahlul Kahf had to make up the prayers for all the time that they were asleep.
Yeah, the same thing for menstruating woman. If you ask her, why the menstruating woman, she makes up the fasting, but she doesn't make up prayer. Prayer, she has to pray 30, 40, 50 prayers.
Because it's not of their choice. It's not of their power.
Let's read this issue. Same page 109, issue 3.
Issue 3. The jurist agreed that these timings, that is, the timings of necessity, pertain to 4 types of people: a menstruating woman entering the period of purity and who begins menstruating before she has prayed; the traveler who remembers prayer in these timings at a time when he is in a settlement; or a settler who remembers it when he is traveling; a minor who attains puberty during these timings; and a disbeliever who accepts Islam. They disagreed about the person who has fainted. Malik and Shafi said that his hukum is like that of menstruating women and is entitled to these timings, for he is not obliged to make up by way of qada for the prayer that he misses because of fainting. According to Abu Hanifa, however, he is obliged to make up for the prayers he has missed when the number of prayers is less than 5.
Okay, so this is the second opinion. Okay.
Thus, in his view, if he recovers from his fainting spell, he prays whenever he recovers. In the opinion of the others, if he recovers during the timings of necessity, he is obliged for the prayer within whose timing he recovers. But if he does not recover during such a time, the prayer is not binding upon him. The case of the person fainting will be treated in greater detail later.
It will be mentioned later, but these are the 3 opinions. These are the opinions of the one who passes out. Does he have to make prayers or not? Next issue we have is the time during which prayer is forbidden. And we have an agreement amongst the scholars that it is 3 times. They agreed on those 3 times. The time of sunrise. Are you allowed to pray during the sunrise?
No, not until
During the sunrise, you're not allowed to. Sunset, same thing. The time after you pray subh and until the sunrise, also you're not allowed to pray. These are 3 timings. Is there any other timing that it is not allowed to pray, or that's it?
Those are not like specific, but like after Asr.
After Asr until sunset. This is another time. The majority of scholars mention that it is prohibited. Another time, before Zawal, when the sun is in the zenith. Is this allowed to pray or no? Are you allowed to pray at that time or no?
At the time of Zawal exactly? As far as I know, no.
You're not allowed. The Prophet ﷺ said that's the time when the fire, the hellfire is extinguished. It is in the peak. But scholars exempted Friday, like Shafi rahimahullah and Malik. So the other timings, there is difference of opinions. Let's read the issue from the book. Page 111.
Issue 1. The jurists agreed that there are 3 time segments in which prayer is prescribed: the time of sunrise, the time of sunset, and the interval between the moment the worshipper has finished the dawn prayer and sunrise. They disagreed about the 2 timings, the time of the declining of the sun and the time after performing Asr prayer. Malik and his disciples maintained that the prescribed times are 4: the times of sunrise, sunset, the time after the dawn prayer up to the sunrise, and the time after Asr up to the sunset. They permitted prayer at the declining of the sun. Al-Shafi maintained that all these 5 time segments are prescribed, except the time of the declining of the sun on Friday. He permitted.
Why on Friday? Why only Friday is exceptional? Because it's the day of Eid. It is the day of Eid for Muslims. So it is not a time for punishment.
A group of jurists exempted from this prescription the time after Asr. The reason of disagreement over this is one factor out of 2. First, the conflict of tradition with a tradition, and the second, conflict of a tradition with practice. In the view of
Yes, why they did not agree on the time after Asr? Now, isn't it the same? Why the Prophet ﷺ forbade companions from praying when the sun rises or during the sunset? There are people who worship the sun, so you don't be like them. They all agreed on the time after Subh until sunrise. But why they disagreed after Asr until the sunset? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed 2 rak'ah after Asr. What was these 2 rak'ah? Is it sunnah? These 2 rak'ah are 2 rak'ah that he missed to pray after Dhuhr. So he prayed them after Asr. He made them up. But then, whenever the Prophet ﷺ does something, he has to continue doing it. So he kept on praying 2 rak'ah until he died, after Asr. Is that allowed for us, or it is exceptional for the Messenger ﷺ? That's what the majority say, but others say no. Since he prayed them, so we can pray them. That's why it is not prohibited to pray after Asr. Okay, so these are the issues. We will stop here, inshallah. Is there any question about what we took? Yes.
Like, say if you went to the Jama'ah for Fajr, and so you didn't pray your 2 sunnah before, and so you obviously joined the Jama'ah. So can you pray your 2 sunnah after the subh, or you're not supposed to?
The sunnah?
Yeah.
Yeah, you pray. We agreed on that. There is a hadith that Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ, saw a man praying, and he asked him, what are those 2 rak'ah? He said, I missed the prayer. This is another issue that we will discuss, inshallah, the prayers for reasons. Now we're talking in general. You're not allowed. What if someone did not pray Asr? He has to pray Asr anytime, be it sunrise, be it sunset, if it's obligatory prayer. What we're talking about in general. Okay, هذا وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.